I want you to picture a tavern tucked inside the walls of an old city. Stone floors worn smooth by 1,000 boots, a fire that never
Much
quite
obliged,
goes out,
Aldra.
and a woman behind the bar who has poured drinks for strangers her entire life. Her name is Aldra. She is sharp, she is tired, and she has buried one
Over here,
grief
the
so
whispers
deep
here are too
that she
loud.
stopped checking on it years ago.
You are not who I
Every
thought you
evening,
were.
a young man comes in, sits in the corner, orders the same dark
truth
ale,
is,
and says almost nothing.
I was wrong.
And every evening, something in Aldra's chest aches in a way she has never been able to name. She thinks it's loneliness. She is wrong. The Iron Barrel is not a glamorous place. It is a squat, thick-walled tavern wedged between a blacksmith and a grain merchant, a few blocks inside the eastern city gate. The ceiling is low, the benches are scarred, and the fireplace smokes if the wind is wrong. Aldra has owned it for 15 years. She bought it with every coin she earned during a decade of washing linens, hauling cargo, and doing whatever work the city offered a refugee woman with nothing but her 2 hands and a will to outlast her own grief. Everyone in the ward knows Aldra. She knows everyone's order, their names, their habits. None of them truly know her. That is the arrangement she prefers. What they do not know is this. Once, she had a husband and a baby boy. Her village, a small settlement in the eastern province, was raided when her son was barely 2 years old. In the chaos of smoke and screaming, he was torn from her arms. She searched for months. She found nothing. Eventually, she stopped searching and started surviving instead. She does not speak of it. She has built the life she has on top of that silence, and the foundation holds. Soren walked into the Iron Barrel on a rainy evening 6 months ago, soaking wet, with the look of a man who had been traveling too long and sleeping badly. He was young, maybe 20, with quiet eyes, calloused hands, and a lean, weathered frame that said sellsword before he opened his mouth. He had barely enough coin for 1 ale. Aldra almost told him the minimum was 2. She didn't. She poured it anyway and didn't charge him, which was not something she made a habit of doing. He came back the next night, and the next. Within a few weeks, he was a regular. Same corner stool, same dark ale, same polite nod when she refilled his cup without being asked. The other regulars accepted him the way regulars accept anyone who is quiet and pays their tab. One of the old soldiers noticed that the boy always fidgeted. Months passed the way they do in a busy tavern, in the rhythm of orders and closing time and the slow accumulation of small habits. Aldra being asked either. It was a quiet, wordless arrangement, and Aldra told herself it meant nothing more than that he was useful and she appreciated useful people. But there were things she could not entirely dismiss. Soren hummed sometimes, barely audible beneath the noise of the tavern, an old melody, simple and lilting, a lullaby, one that Aldra had not heard since she last sang it herself years ago to an infant she was rocking to sleep in a village that no longer existed. She told herself it was a common tune. Plenty of people knew it. Then one evening, Soren rolled up his sleeve to help shift a heavy cask, and Aldra saw the scar, small, crescent-shaped, on his inner forearm. Her hands went cold. She stood perfectly still for 3 full seconds. Then she told herself that scars like that were common too, and she went back to work. The night the pendant ended up on the bar was a slow one, a Tuesday in deep winter, half the regulars home early. Soren sat rubbing a sore shoulder, and at some point he unclasped the chain and set the pendant down to get it out of the way. Aldra reached over to wipe the counter and picked it up without thinking. It was an iron sparrow. Small, simply made, the edges rubbed soft from years of handling. The wings were slightly uneven, the work of someone without formal training, someone who had made it by hand with love rather than skill. Aldra had made one exactly like it. She had pressed it into her infant son's blanket the night the raiders came, pressed it there deliberately, desperately, hoping it would travel with him, hoping it would be something, some proof, some thread leading back to her. "Where did you get this?" Her voice came out flat. She was proud of that. Soren looked mildly surprised at her interest. He said he'd had it his whole life. A woman at the orphanage told him he'd been clutching it when he was brought in as a toddler. He'd never known where it came from. Aldra set the pendant down carefully. She said, Then she walked to the back room. She leaned against the back wall and shook, not outwardly, not in any way anyone could see, but inside, every carefully mortared stone in the foundation of the last 20 years shifted at once. She did the arithmetic with the cold efficiency of a woman who had survived by being practical. Soren's age matched, the Eastern Province orphanage matched, the timing of the raids matched, the scar on his forearm. She had been there when he got that scar, a tumble against the hearthstone when he was 18 months old, and she had held him while he cried. The lullaby, the pendant, the scar, the pull she had felt toward him from the very first night that she had refused, over and over, to examine too closely. She splashed cold water on her face, she straightened her apron, she walked back out, refilled his cup, and did not look at him directly. She said, "On the house tonight." Soren blinked at her, puzzled, a little touched. He gave her a small, crooked smile. Her heart broke so quietly that no one in the room heard a thing. She held herself together for 3 days. On the 4th day, she paid a traveling record keeper to search the orphan registrations from the Eastern Province, Millhaven District, roughly 20 years back. He returned by evening, which she had not expected. He laid a copied registry entry on the bar. She read it twice. Boy, approximately 2 years of age, brought in during the 3rd year of the Ashwood raids, in possession of 1 iron sparrow pendant. No family name. Registered. Foundling. Name assigned by warden. Soren. That night she waited until the last customer left. When Soren stood to go, she said his name, just his name, but differently than she ever had before. She put the record on the bar. She put her hands flat beside it, steadied herself, and told him everything. The village, the fire, the pendant she had pressed into his blanket, the lullaby she had sung every night of his life for the 2 years she'd had him. She said it all plainly, in order, without any of the carefully constructed silence she had spent 20 years perfecting, and she did not cry until the very last sentence. Soren stared at the record. He stared at her hands. He looked up at her face. He said nothing for a moment that stretched like a long winter night. Then he reached across the bar and covered her hands with his. Aldra made a sound she had not made in 20 years. It was not a word. She would realize later that it was the same gesture she used to make with his baby fists, covering them with her palms to warm them on cold mornings. She did not know if he remembered that. She suspected somehow some part of him did. The fire crackled. The city moved on outside, indifferent and ancient. Inside the iron barrel, Aldra poured 2 cups of wine, not ale, but wine, the good bottles she kept on the high shelf for occasions she had almost stopped believing would come. They sat on opposite sides of the bar, mother and son, and began, slowly, quietly, with no map and no rush, the long work of learning each other. Some reunions don't arrive with fanfare. Some slip through a cracked door in the middle of an ordinary winter, carried by a lullaby, a scar, and a small iron sparrow that somehow, impossibly, stubbornly, found its way